Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is an introductory video. In this video, we only talking about the translation and you could say very brief interpretation of the Surah Maryam before we go into the depth of grammar applying what we have learned so far. And before we start looking at the first ayats, we need to give a general context. And the Surah Maryam, by its nature, or by what it is Surah Makkiyah, Surah revealed in the Meccan period of Islam. What does it mean that the Surah is Makkiyah? We know that when it comes to Medinan period of Islam, this is the period of legislation, the time of Ahkam. When it comes to Makkiyah, it precedes the Medinan period of Islam. The Meccan period of Islam is about establishing firm foundation, establishing belief. So these surahs and the ayats of the surahs are mostly concerned with Aqidah, is concerned with Islamic belief. And you will find all of this in Surah Maryam. You will find the ayats which speak about transcendence of Allah, power of Allah, oneness of Allah, and because of this power of Allah, resurrection is possible and something that inevitably will happen, as well as it talks about the matters of guidance and misguidance. All of this is related to belief. As we know, all ayats of Quran can be roughly divided into three categories. The ayats which are about belief and the deen, usuluddin. Then there are ayats which are related to ahkam, and then stories. So here we will find stories, but through these stories we get knowledge about Aqidah. So these stories are illustrations of this, our tenets of belief. So if we will look at the general structure of the Surah Maryam, we will find that it starts with the story of Zachariah and Yahya. Then we have story of Maryam and Isa, and after this there is a certain conclusion and a lesson, what we can deduce from these two stories. Then Allah mentions Ibrahim, Musa, Ismail, Idris, and then also there is a certain summary. So these stories, these prophets were mentioned, something what summarizes and becomes a lesson for us. And then Allah speaks. There is a very special section of this, of the structure of this surah, is that revelation is only by Allah. Allah doesn't forget, and Allah reveals wherever and whenever He wishes. Then, after this, Allah mentions some of the objections of kuffar and refutes them, gives the counter arguments, and then there is a summary and conclusion of surah. Today we will talk about, in this video we'll talk about story of Zachariah and Yahya, what Surah Maryam begins with. So Surah Maryam, the first ayah is Kaf, Ha, Ya, Rain, Sod. So these are the separate letters. These separate letters, which come in the beginning of certain surah, they are known in Arabic as al-huruf al-muqatta'a, which literally means separate letters. Al-huruf letters, al-muqatta'a, separate. So if we will ask a question, what does it mean? The safest answer, and that's the answer you'll find, for example, in Tafsir Jalalain, Allahu a'lamu bimuradihi bidhalik. Allah knows better the meaning behind it. We are not saying it's meaningless, we are not saying it is random, but Allah knows better. Yes, there are some interpretation. This is the easiest and the safest to know and to remember. Now, nevertheless, we can say the exact meaning of why kaf, why ha, why ya. We can say we leave this knowledge to Allah, but nevertheless we can learn something what does it give? What does it provide when the surah begins with the separate letters? One thing, it gains attention of a listener. So the surah doesn't just start with the story or with some message, but it starts with the letters. So immediately it gains attention of a listener. It is unusual. So a listener listening to it, trying to make sense what is going on. And then, besides this, there is a certain implicit meaning. And the implicit meaning is surah begins with the same letters that you are using in the speech, like alif, lam, mim. We all know, if we have studied Arabic letters, we know alif, we know lam, we know mim. In this case, we know kaf, ha, ya, rain, sod. We all compile our speech in Arabic using these Arabic letters. So, if human beings, humanity, who speak Arabic, using the same letters to provide their speech, then if Quran and the speech of Arabs made of the same letters, why don't Arabs produce something which is similar to Quran? Even one chapter, even one surah, and we know the shortest surah is Surah Al-Kawthar, only 3 ayats. So in this, there is an indication you are using the same language in the speech, but you're not able to produce anything similar to it. Then we have the beginning of the actual narration of the story of Zakaria. ذكر رحمة ربك عبده Zakaria. This is a mention, or this is a remembrance, this is to mention the story of your Lord, to the mercy of your Lord to his servant Zakaria. So when we speak about mercy of Allah to Zakaria, this is one way of speaking about mercy of your Lord. And this is the one which is highlighted in this translation. But another way of reading it, and again, if we learn Arabic grammar and we will see how words are joined together, we will see that another way of reading it is that actually Zakaria is being the mercy. So mention the mercy of your Lord, his slave Zakaria. This is another way of interpreting it. So it means Zakaria becomes a mercy. And Zakaria becomes a mercy, for example, for us is that there is a surah, and in the beginning we have his story mentioned, and from this story we can learn so much. And from this story can become a reason for the many Christians to become Muslim, because this is the same story that the same prophet that they believe. So in this case, we can read it as actually Zakaria being a mercy for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This surah being revealed to him, this story about Zakaria, and to us, to his ummah. Then, next ayah says, إِذْ نَادَى رَبَّهُ نِدَاءً خَفِيًّا. When he, meaning Zakaria, called his Lord in a low voice. Nida'an khafiya. Nida, you can say call, and khafiya, low, hidden. So something which is the opposite of apparent and clearly heard. As we can mention, first of all, on the point of Aqidah, you call to Allah in a low voice, you call to Allah in a loud voice. There's no difference for Allah in hearing it. Why? Because all of this creation, Allah is all knowledgeable, Allah is all hearing, all knowing, all seeing. For Allah, there is no difference. All of this is possible for Allah. Then, we could ask a question. Allah says that He called His Lord. What do we learn from this? That He called His Lord in a low voice. First way of looking at it is to say that low voice to show humility. Because why? Because dua is generally performed quietly by itself, by its nature. You will find it in Quran, ayah udu rabbakum tadarruan wa khufya. So you call to your Lord with humility, with humbleness, and what we could call privately, humbly, quietly. This is one way of interpreting it, to say that Sayyidina Zakaria was calling Allah with humbleness. Another way to explain Nida and Khafiya, to say not in a low voice, but privately. Meaning that he did not want others to hear it. Then you'd ask why he wouldn't want others to hear it, why it is private. One way, if by looking at another ayah, وَإِنِّي خِفْتُ الْمَوَالِيَ مِنْ وَرَائِي, I am afraid, this is another following ayah of the Surah Zakaria, I am afraid for my kinsmen after me, I'm afraid for them. The whole point is that he wanted a successor who would guide his people, because he did not trust his kinsmen, those who will be left after him. He would not trust them. He was afraid they will change the deen and corrupt the teachings that guide creation to Allah. So in this case, it means that he did not want to hear him. That's what it means privately. Another way of interpreting it is to say he called his Lord in a low voice because it was actually dua in a prayer, and when you make dua in a prayer, it is going to be quiet. And if we will make a cross reference, because this story is also mentioned in Surah Al Imran, it gives you there in the ayat where he said that he entered, Zakaria entered to Maryam, وجدها عندها رزقا. He found provision. He said, قال مريم أنا لك هذا. Maryam, where you got it from? He said, from Allah. And Allah يرزق من يشاء بغير حساب. Allah provides to whomever he wishes without any count. And then it says, هنالك دعا زكريا ربه. And in this moment there in Mihrab, Zakaria called to his Lord. And then this is dua which is mentioned, قال ربي هب لي من لدنك ذرية طيبة إنك سميع الدعاء. So it means that in that moment, in Mihrab, in the prayer, Zakaria called to Allah. So it was in a prayer. So that's why it was in a low voice.